I began my presentation with this question. Have you experienced looking at an artwork like a painting or a sculpture, then suddenly the object begins to penetrate not only in your eyes, but in your mind and soul? Others may say this is merely an aesthetic experience, but we cannot deny that more than seeing the beautiful object, reflecting upon the message it conveys can take place. It is not anymore simply looking at aesthetically, but pondering upon intellectually. Furthermore, the same object can lead a person to encounter the higher reality that it portrays. Such is the possibility of transcending from what is seen to the unseen through visual arts. I will present this subject as a preacher and a painter myself. The title of my presentation is Visual Arts, Transcending from what is seen to the unseen. Three settings of preaching through visual arts can be: first, within the church or the Christian community; second, outside the church or the secular community; and third, in the social media or the digital community. Corresponding to these are my three ways of preaching through visual arts. First, making captions or pamphlets. Second, joining art exhibitions. And third, utilizing social media as a digital pulpit. Now, preaching through visual arts within the church or the Christian community. The traditional way of transmitting the Christian message, that is through spoken and written words, is an essential means of drawing people closer to Christ. As time passes, the way Christians share their faith develops, and new preaching modes are employed. One of the means that we cannot ignore is utilizing arts, particularly visual arts like paintings and sculptures. The places where people gather for worship have them. They are not just meant to beautify these sacred places, but primarily to impart the Christian message to the congregation. Their usefulness and effectivity as a means of preaching are undeniable. I, as a priest painter myself, can personally attest to this. When I was ministering in the parish, I used to make captions based on the liturgical season or celebration and place them near the sanctuary. The PowerPoint slide shows some samples of illustrations I made. They serve as visual aids when I deliver homilies. Likewise, I made illustrated pamphlets containing the fundamental Christian doctrines. I used them during catechesis and distributed some copies to the parishioners. These are efficient preaching materials, both for children and adults. They do not just appreciate the artworks that they see, but reflect upon the message that these objects convey. Transcending from what is seen to the unseen happens this way. First, people see the artworks, then they learn what message they are conveying. Finally, by the grace of God, they will have a religious experience. Second, preaching through visual arts outside the church or the secular community. Different places can be locations for displaying visual arts. These can either be kept in private houses or exhibited in museums, galleries, malls, or hotels. Displaying artworks with a religious theme in places outside the church can be a form of preaching. This way, people of different backgrounds can see them. While it is true that many people see them as simply artworks, but we cannot ignore the possibility of knowing the message these objects convey. Even outside the church, the transcendence from what is seen to the unseen can occur. I experienced preaching through visual arts outside the church of the secular community every time I participate in an art exhibition. I intend not only to express myself as a painter, but to share the Christian faith and values. The PowerPoint slide shows some of my paintings during an art exhibit in one of the Philippine malls. Some of my inspirations every time I paint are Fra Angelico or Blessed John of Fiesole, who made series of frescoes in Florence, Saint Catherine of Bologna, patron saint of painters, and Saint Luke, evangelist, painter, and iconographer, who according to the 6th century tradition painted the portrait of the Blessed Mother. Third, reaching through visual arts in the social media or the digital community. Centuries ago, missionaries brought works of art like sacred images to facilitate their preaching to other people. These icons remind the people of the reality of an unseen being whom the missionaries introduced to them. For instance, in the Philippines, the image of the infant Jesus or Santo Niño was brought by the Spanish missionaries 500 years ago, the year 1521, and eventually replaced the idols of the natives. The Philippines is celebrating this year the centennial anniversary of Christianity. Other famous devotional images in the Philippines are Black Nazarene from Mexico, 1606, and Our Lady of Peñafrancia, 1710. They serve as means to catechize the present generation of Catholics, particularly during their feast days where thousands of people would gather. The PowerPoint slide shows the pictures of Santo Niño and Black Nazarene. Just like what the missionaries did before, Christians today are called to preach the gospel. But how could they do this during this digital age? Even if we cannot bring sacred images to others, we can utilize different social media platforms to share our faith, especially that there is a pandemic. If one can preach through visual arts within the Christian and secular communities, we can also do so to the digital community. I myself utilize social media as a digital pulpit to preach through arts. I use my social media accounts to share my artworks and add short spiritual reflections, doctrinal statements, or biblical passages. The PowerPoint slide shows the Traslación of Our Lady of Peñafrancia that I painted and used as a cover photo of my Facebook page. In my post, I used the hashtag preaching through arts. These posts could attract people of different backgrounds. From that attraction, they can encounter the message, and from knowing what these posts convey, they can ponder upon the thoughts about our faith. I end this presentation with this reminder that every Christian can be a preacher to people he or she encounters personally or virtually. To the visual artist, they can utilize their artworks by sharing them in the Christian, secular, or digital communities. To the non-artists, they can also preach through arts by using them as visual aids, promoting the works of preacher artists, or sharing them in their social media accounts. In my experience of making captions or pamphlets, joining art exhibitions, and utilizing social media as a digital pulpit, I could attest that visual arts are silent but effective instruments of preaching. They could help many people to transcend from what is seen to the unseen. Thank you.